Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Following extreme violence, which has left more than 2,500 people dead or injured, the Prime Minister of Haiti has resigned. The Alberta government announced a $15 million nurse practitioner model it says will give Albertans more access to primary care. And the Canadian Taxpayers Federation explains why it's not impressed with a recent announcement that $5 billion taxpayer dollars will be going to Honda.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Ariel Henry has officially resigned as the Prime Minister of Haiti. This clears the way for a new government to be formed in the Caribbean nation, which has been racked by gang violence. That violence has killed or injured more than 2,500 people from January to March.
Because of the violence, we cannot go to election. And one of the things that we aim is to have election as soon as possible.
Henry presented his resignation in a letter signed in Los Angeles on Wednesday. The governing council is now tasked with choosing a new prime minister and cabinet to be sworn in. The war between Israel and Hamas has now been ongoing for over 200 days. As TBN Israel's Yair Pinto explains now, the Israel Defense Forces are preparing for a military operation into Rafah, a tent city that was erected for displaced Gazans.
The war continues, and thousands of soldiers are training at bases all over Israel to prepare for the next large maneuver into Rafah, as well as possibly re-entering towns in the center of the Gaza Strip where Hamas has begun to re-emerge. The U.S. is still reviewing the IDF's plans to evacuate hundreds of thousands of Palestinian civilians from Rafah before moving in to confront the remaining Hamas battalions. This plan includes setting up large tent cities for the evacuees to shelter in, and several thousand tents have already been set up, while more are underway. The plan to evacuate the civilians from Rafah has been changed several times in consultation with the Americans, and they might need to be changed again. The general outline of the plan can be seen, however, and it includes an initial stage where the IDF moves in with large formations to strike a hammer blow against Hamas, then withdraws and make raids as necessary to confront whatever small Hamas units still remain.
A service was held on Thursday morning at Washington's National Cathedral to honor the 7 World Central KitchenAid workers who were killed on April 1st when their convoy was hit by Israeli airstrikes in Gaza. Celebrity chef Jose Andres spoke at the Celebration of Life service, and cellist Yo-Yo Ma was expected to perform. The dead included dual American-Canadian citizen Jacob Flickinger.
When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain. And after he sat down, his disciples came to him. And he began to speak and taught them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will receive mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God."
After Iran's missile barrage against Israel earlier this month, many were relieved that 99% of more than 300 drones and missiles fired at them were shot down. Most didn't even make it into Israeli airspace. A rabbi with the Simon Wiesenthal Center, who was interviewed on CBN News recently, says it was nothing short of a miracle that no one was killed.
I think it's going to take a little while for the full effect of it, for the facts to set in. But it wasn't, hey, the IDF was really successful with the aid of our allies, and Israel survived, even though there was stuff coming in all over the country, literally. 99% of the projectiles coming in, drones and missiles, were shot down. There was minimal property damage and one serious injury.
The United Nations is calling for a clear and credible investigation of mass graves which were uncovered at two major hospitals in war-torn Gaza that were recently raided by Israeli troops. Joe Fetterman with the Associated Press has more.
Palestinian health officials in the Gaza Strip are continuing the difficult task of digging up bodies from mass graves outside of two major hospitals. These hospitals in Gaza City and the southern town of Khan Yunis were both the scenes of Israeli military operations. So far, hundreds of bodies have been exhumed. Now, Israel says it has nothing to do with these mass graves. It says it didn't bury anyone, and that people buried there likely were either killed in battle or were patients who died inside the hospitals. But the international community is asking some tough questions. The United States has demanded that Israel provide more information. The United Nations is calling for an international investigation. It wants to know who was buried there and what were the circumstances behind these deaths. Now, under international law, hospitals receive special protections from combat. However, Israel says that Hamas operated in these hospitals, used them for military purposes, and when that happens, it says these protections are removed.
Wow. Well, we enjoyed another beautiful day across much of southwestern Alberta today. Lots of sunshine and temperatures in the high teens. Jeanette Rocher is now with a quick look at the weather picture. Jeanette, as much as we've been enjoying the mild temperatures, we're desperate for more moisture. Any on the immediate horizon?
Yeah, well, it does look like it's going to rain out there, doesn't it, Hal? But according to Environment Canada, there is no moisture on the immediate horizon. We are looking at some cloudy, partly cloudy days, at least until we get into May. But no moisture for now. We are also expected to see that little dip in temperature as well, as we're dropping down to 12 degrees on Friday. Also, we're looking at winds up to 40 kilometers per hour tomorrow. And then as for the rest of the weekend and next week, we'll all be back later in the show to give you that full forecast.
Thanks so much, Jeanette. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith announced a $15 million nurse practitioner model she says will give Albertans more access to the primary care that they need. Smith says through the program, nurse practitioners will receive around 80% of the compensation provided to family physicians who provide primary care. Compensation will be based on the amount of patients and the number of patient care hours provided. She says it will enable nurse practitioners to practice patient care autonomously and operate their own business practices. They'll also be able to practice in existing primary care clinics.
Nurse practitioners are a welcome and integral part of the solution to primary care access. They are qualified healthcare professionals whose education and training allow them to function as primary care providers and offer many of the same services as doctors. However, Alberta hasn't had a direct funding model that allows nurse practitioners to work autonomously in a primary care environment, have their own practices, until now. Through the new program, Alberta's government will compensate these highly trained, highly valued medical professionals to practice patient care and provide the health care they are qualified to do.
A well-known Lethbridge businessman who used to own the legendary Movie Mill here in town needs our help. Len Binning put out an appeal on social media looking for a kidney donor. Len joins us now from a hospital here in Lethbridge with more. Len, what made you post on various social media channels that you're looking for a kidney? Some would say, you know, that's a little unorthodox.
I maybe am a little unorthodox. I have the need, and I had to get the word out. If I simply went on the list and waited, I could be years waiting. I'm amazed at the response that I've got, and I've got several people who have offered to be tested. They're matching blood types, and so they could speed up the process by years. And so maybe sometime this year, I can be the recipient.
Len, we really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much. I mean, you're actually doing this interview from a hospital bed while you're undergoing dialysis?
Let me show you the machine that keeps me alive 3 times a week. So that machine there functions as my kidneys, and it filters out all of the wastes and fluids that normally your kidneys would do. So it is remarkable and astonishing, and I'm grateful for it.
Now, you actually underwent some major surgery recently. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, my life has been lots of fun. I had to have a mitral valve replaced in my heart, and it was done through minimal invasive surgery. And they did that on March the 20th. And 2.5 weeks later, I was traveling. I maybe shouldn't have, but I was traveling, and I feel great. I felt great. I feel I've been blessed, and I've got such a positive family and friend circle. It's helping me out greatly.
A story we recently aired on Bridge City News is how a New Jersey woman had a pig's kidney implanted in her to help save her life. So, Len, at any point did you maybe consider that?
Well, my valve is now a pig's valve, so I don't mind having a cousin as a kidney if that's a possibility.
You know, folks want to reach out to you directly to help out, perhaps to see maybe if they can potentially be a match. What's the best way to get hold of you?
Messenger, Facebook. My email is still len@moviemill.com. So there's multiple ways, and just because someone's the same blood type doesn't mean they'll be a match. So there's some tests that they have to go through, and they have to be in relatively good health. But the more the merrier, and the more education that gets out there, the better it is for everybody.
Thanks again for your time today, Len. Godspeed, and praying you find a match real soon.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
82 animals found in distress have been seized from a property in central Alberta. The Alberta SPCA says it was asked to help Mounties at the location in Mountain View County on Tuesday. Most of the animals taken in were dogs, 56 to be exact. Officials say 10 sheep, 9 llamas, 4 chicken, and 3 geese were also taken into care. No word yet on if or when charges may be laid. On June 22nd, party members with the Alberta NDP will be choosing their new leader to succeed Rachel Notley. Now, one of the 5 candidates vying to replace Notley is Calgary MLA Kathleen Ganley. A hot-button issue she's campaigning on right now is affordability and tax relief for Albertans.
One of the first policies I put out was to increase the personal income tax exemption to $26,000. So that means that people under the low income cutoff wouldn't pay provincial income tax at all. And that would sort of phase out at higher incomes, so at the end of the first bracket. So this would be a program very much targeted at giving relief to families, in who are struggling, and families who are in the middle class.
Make sure you catch my full interview with Alberta NDP leadership hopeful Kathleen Ganley coming up in the second half of our broadcast. A new $2.5 billion Honda electric vehicle battery plant is going to be built in Alliston, Ontario. Both the federal and Ontario governments will be pitching in with funding to retool the current facility as part of a $15 billion overall project that's expected to create around 1,000 jobs.
A whole ecosystem will be built with 4 new manufacturing plants in Ontario, including an EV assembly plant, a standalone battery manufacturing plant, and 2 plants for battery components. These investments will create well over 1,000 well-paying manufacturing jobs, as well as many, many construction jobs, and of course, jobs all across Ontario and the country for auto parts suppliers.
Today's announcement of Honda's estimated $15 billion investment with its joint venture partners will be a game changer for the industry. Once built and operational, Honda's massive new electric vehicle plant and EV battery facility here in Alliston will employ more than 4,200 people and have the production capacity to produce up to 240,000 electric vehicles each and every year.
It appears as though the Canadian Taxpayers Federation was not impressed with the recent announcement by the Prime Minister and Ontario Premier Ford about the Honda EV plant announcement. The group's Ontario Director, Jay Goldberg, explains why.
Well, if you just look at the top line numbers, Premier Doug Ford and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced today $5 billion are coming out of taxpayers' wallets and going to Honda to create 1,000 jobs. So that's $5 million a job. Governments need to get out of the business of cherry picking winners and losers, in this case, a very wealthy multinational corporation, and make sure that they're leaving money in the pockets of taxpayers instead. So this is the exact wrong approach when it comes to affordability and creating jobs.
Police in Manitoba say a 4-year-old boy died after he ran into traffic in Brandon. Witnesses told police that the child ran out of a business parking lot on Monday. They say he hit the side of a trailer that was being towed by a truck. Sadly, the child died from his injuries in hospital. Manitoba RCMP have charged a man with first-degree murder more than 2 years after a double homicide in a remote northern community. The remains of a man and woman were found inside of a home on the Northlands Diné-Sulene First Nation that had been engulfed in flames back in 2021. RCMP say autopsy showed the two had been shot. The investigation stretched into Saskatchewan, where police arrested 22-year-old Leon Paul Mercredi this week in the community of Fond du Lac. It was on this day that radio pioneer Guglielmo Marconi was born, the Hubble Space Telescope was deployed into orbit, and legendary jazz singer Ella Fitzgerald was born. This is Today in History for April the 25th.
April 25th, 1874. Radio pioneer Guglielmo Marconi is born in Bologna, Italy.
In spite of the great distance everly separating us, you hear my voice as clearly and as distinctly as I think you should.
1507. America gets its name nearly 15 years after Christopher Columbus's first voyage to the New World. A German cartographer first uses the term on a world map to refer to the huge landmass in the Western Hemisphere. The name is in honor of Amerigo Vespucci, the Italian navigator. 1945, during World War II, American and Soviet troops in Europe meet on the Elbe River. It's a sign that the collapse of Nazi Germany and the end of the war in Europe are near. 1990.
The first of NASA's great observatories is now on station at 330 nautical miles above the Earth.
Space Shuttle Discovery deploys the Hubble Space Telescope into orbit around the Earth. And 1918.
A tisket, a tasket, a brown and yellow basket.
Ella Fitzgerald, one of the great jazz singers of the 20th century, is born in Newport News, Virginia. Today in History, April 25th. Sandy Kozel, The Associated Press.
Well, we enjoyed lots of sunshine again today across much of southwestern Alberta. It was nice and warm, and that trend should continue. A full look at the weather pictures coming up. We had sunshine mixed with clouds earlier today in Lethbridge, and fairly warm too. Jeanette Rocher is now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, many here in southern Alberta have been talking about the drought. Not a lot of moisture so far. Can we expect some rain anytime soon?
Not really soon enough, Hal. We are seeing a lot of clouds and partly cloudy skies according to Environment Canada. We're seeing mainly cloudy skies on Friday, high of 12 degrees, so we're going to see that little dip in temperature there. Remaining at 12 on a Saturday with mainly cloudy skies, and then we're going to see those clouds clear up a bit on a Sunday, giving us some sunshine, and then back up to the teens there, high of 16 degrees, 15 for both Monday and Tuesday, and then all the way up to 19 degrees by Wednesday. So the average high for this time of year is 15, average low 1. 28 was our record high on this day. That happened back in 1946, and in 1959 we were sitting at a chilly -10. Sun rose this morning at 6:18, and we're sitting at 8:41 tonight for our sunset, giving us 14 hours and 21 minutes of daylight. Okay, a bit of a rainy one on the coast tomorrow. Victoria looking at 60% a chance of showers, 12 degrees for a high there, 14 for a high in Vancouver, seeing showers earlier on in the day. Also a bit windy by the water, about 30 winds there. Fairly clear skies in Edmonton tomorrow, high of 11 degrees, high of 9 in Calgary with partly cloudy skies. As we get to the rest of the prairies, we're seeing some windy conditions, 20 to 40 winds in Saskatoon, but clear skies, 16 for a high, all the way up to 20 degrees in Regina with beautiful sunshine, but up to 50 winds. And then Winnipeg also seeing 30 to 50 kilometer per hour winds, 12 degrees for a high, and they could see a chance of showers there in Winnipeg as well. As we get to Toronto, now there is a frost advisory in effect for this evening and into Friday morning, but after that, it's we're looking at sunshine, so sunny skies there, 11 for a high, 15 for a high in Ottawa, and Montreal expecting a high tomorrow of 13 degrees with beautiful sunshine in those cities as well. Same thing for the East Coast. We're seeing lots of sunshine, lots of clear skies. Fredericton sitting at 9 for Halifax as well, up to 6 degrees in Charlottetown rather. And St. John's also sitting at 6 degrees with partly cloudy skies. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Air Canada announced that it is now assigning seats for standard and basic fares. Company officials say when customers check in, a seat will automatically be assigned to them. They say there is a certain seat that you prefer, you're going to have to pay for it. You have to pay a fee. Preferred seat prices range from $20 to $199. Officials also said that Aeroplan points cannot be used to purchase a preferred seat. A former SNC-Lavalin executive convicted of corruption and fraud has been sentenced to 3.5 years in prison. A police investigation revealed that Normand Morin paid bribes of $2.23 million in order to secure a $128 million contract to repair Quebec's Jacques Cartier Bridge deck in the early 2000s. The former CEO of Federal Bridge Corporation had admitted to receiving the bribes through Swiss bank accounts between 1997 and 2004. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and Ontario Premier Doug Ford say it's a game changer for manufacturing here in Canada, as Honda plans to build an electric vehicle battery plant next to its existing facility in Alliston, Ontario, which will be retooled to produce fully electric vehicles. The $15 billion project includes about $2.5 billion each from the federal and Ontario governments. The two plants are expected to create 1,000 new jobs, and once the facility is fully operational in 2028, it'll produce up to 240,000 electric vehicles a year. Now, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation was not impressed with the Ontario government and Ottawa giving Honda $5 billion. Ontario Director of the CTF, Jay Goldberg, says the $5 billion for 1,000 jobs works out to paying roughly $5 million per job. Global automakers and EV startups are unveiling new models and concept cars at China's largest auto show. The focus will be on the transformation of digitally connected new energy vehicles. Toyota and Nissan both announced partnerships with major Chinese technology companies as they try to meet consumer demand in China for AI-enabled online connectivity in cars. Electric vehicles accounted for about a quarter of all auto sales in China last year. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 11 points on the day to finish at 21,885. The Dow was down 375 points to 38,085. The S&P 500 was down 23 on the day to 5,048, and the Nasdaq was down 100 points to 15,611. West Texas Intermediate Oil was up 76 cents to 83.57 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 2 cents to $1.64 US. Gold was up $16.29 on the day to $23.3246 US an ounce, and silver was up 27 cents to $27.43 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.57 per bushel, barley's at $6.40, canola's at $13.99, and corn is at $7.93 per bushel. Live cattle were up $1.85 to $183.95. Feeder cattle were up $1.78 to $244.88, and lean hogs May contract was down $2.08 to $95.28. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to $73.21 US. Recapping one of our top stories, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith announced a $15 million nurse practitioner model she says will give Albertans more access to the primary care they need. Smith says through the program, nurse practitioners will receive around 80% of the compensation provided to family physicians who normally provide comprehensive primary care. Compensation will be based on the amount of patients and the number of patient care hours provided. Well, the Alberta NDP will be choosing their new leader on June the 22nd. Coming up, we're going to chat with Calgary MLA Kathleen Ganley, who's vying for the party's top job, and will explain her vision for Alberta shortly. Watch that Q&A coming up. Listen, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also, be sure to visit our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews.
Here's today's Bridge City News community calendar. Henderson Lake Park Run invites all to throw on a pair of runners and participate in a free weekly computer-timed and recorded 5-kilometer walk, jog, or run. The park run is one of 2,100 park runs held around the world. Dogs on leashes and kids in strollers are welcome too. The park run begins at the Kinsman Picnic Shelter at 9 a.m. every Saturday. To register, visit parkrun.ca. Celebrate Recovery is a Christ-centered recovery program for any hurt, hang-up, and habit. This group meets Friday nights at Park Meadows Baptist Church. The evening begins at 7 p.m. with a large group session, followed by small groups at 8 with coffee and dessert at 9. For more information, visit celebraterecovery.ca or call Park Meadows Church office at 403-327-4422. And that's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar.
Five candidates are vying to replace Alberta NDP leader Rachel Notley on June 22nd. Now, one of those is Calgary MLA Kathleen Ganley, who served as Minister of Justice in Rachel Notley's government. She joins us now actually from our provincial capital in Edmonton. Kathleen, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thanks so much for having me.
You bet. Now, can you tell our viewers why you believe that you're the best candidate for the job and what it is that kind of makes you stand out compared to some of the other candidates?
Yeah, so my theory of the case, if you will, is that what we need to do to win the next election is to work incredibly hard talking to a lot of folks, because that's how you change hearts and minds with one-on-one conversations, and to tell them a story about the economy, to talk to them about real concrete ideas on why our ideas are better on the economy. The UCP does a very good job of this, of telling people that if they give more money to their bosses, that they'll somehow get ahead. But that story isn't true. And so I think we need to take up a little more of that space with concrete ideas on how to cut people's costs and how to increase their wages.
Yeah, let's talk about some of the other hot button issues you're hearing as you're door knocking. So what are you hearing right now? What's top of mind with people? Obviously, it is the economy, but what else are you hearing?
So most people's top concern right now, I would say, is cost of living, that and probably healthcare as well. So we have a healthcare system that is basically crumbling under the UCP. It's really, well, I mean, it's quite literally in some cases held together with duct tape. And that's because, the people working in that system put their hearts and souls into it because they care so incredibly deeply about the people that they're caring for, that they're willing to sort of, work extra and stretch themselves extra to try and keep that system together. But, they can't do that forever. And it's an awful lot to ask of them. And so, yeah, people are very, very concerned about the healthcare system under the UCP and their failure to do anything about it. They're also deeply concerned about their ability to pay their rent, to pay their mortgage, to afford their groceries.
Yeah, let's talk a bit about inflation right now, the high cost of living. Now, you feel, Kathleen, that Albertans need some kind of tax relief. Can you explain?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the first policies I put out was to increase the personal income tax exemption to $26,000. So that means that people under the low income cutoff wouldn't pay provincial income tax at all. And that would sort of phase out at higher incomes. So at the end of the first bracket. So this would be a program very much targeted at giving relief to families, in who are struggling and families who are in the middle class.
Now, you'd also like to see an increase in the minimum wage here in Alberta, in our province, which I believe is $15 an hour, but for federal workers, it's $17.30. How much of an increase are we talking about?
So if I were premier right now, I would put it up to $16 immediately, $17 next year, and then index it to inflation. In the last 5 years, inflation has gone up 18%. Minimum wage workers, they haven't had a raise of even a dime.
What about the impact, though, on small business owners? That's quite a hit. I mean, $1 an hour, each of the next 2 or 3 years. Have you talked to a lot of business owners? Could they sustain that?
Yeah, so I think that many small business owners already recognize that what turns the local economy more is giving people money to spend in the local economy. And when you give more to those who have less, they have more to spend in that local economy. It's actually helpful to small business. But I think in addition to that, we have started rolling out our offer to small businesses. And one of the first things we've included is, basically temporary no interest loans to cover unpaid accounts receivable. A lot of the problems that we're hearing from small business owners are about sort of cash flow, right? Especially when a larger company has failed to pay their accounts. So we are, trying to help small businesses out with that. So we make sure that we have a robust economy.
Now, Kathleen, Alberta has a very long and storied history of economic success coming from the oil and gas sector. But of course, there are also concerns about how this impacts the environment. Is there a way to see the energy sector continue to thrive while also reducing emissions? Let's talk about some synergy here.
Yeah, I 100% believe that energy has to be a yes and conversation. So we have to talk about supporting oil and gas and supporting new forms of energy. I think the reason we're failing to make progress on this issue is because the UCP and others who have an interest in it have very effectively framed this as an either or conversation. Either you can care about climate change, or you can have a job that pays your mortgage and feeds your family. Increasingly, that's not going to be the case. There is some level of change that's coming, and some of that is addressing climate change, but some of that is just that processes are different at oil and gas companies. They don't need to employ nearly as many people to do the same work. And so what people should have an interest in is a government that understands what's happening and is in a position to manage that diversification of our energy portfolio in such a way that it keeps people working and it makes sure that wealth vests to everyone rather than just to a few.
The province recently announced that it's putting millions of dollars investing into the hydrogen sector, 28 big projects, including some projects as well in Calgary and Edmonton. What are your thoughts when it comes to putting the eggs in the hydrogen basket?
Well, I don't think we should put all our eggs in any one basket. I do think there's a lot of opportunity in hydrogen. There's also a lot of opportunity in geothermal. There's also a lot of opportunity in renewables paired with storage on our electricity grid. So I think that it really does have to be a conversation about exploring all of the possibilities to make sure that we are best placed. Alberta has the minds to be a leader in this for a really long time. And if we invest in those people, if we create the ecosystem where they can thrive, we can be in a position to be exporting our technology, whether that's methane reduction or geothermal technology, to the rest of the world for generations to come.
Now, you touched on electricity here, Kathleen. A lot of Albertans are hurting right now with the high electricity rates. What are your thoughts about trying to get that under control and make life more affordable for Albertans?
Yeah, so I believe the thing that is driving these high electricity rates is price gouging. So it is essentially companies that have a very large share of the power market, and they're therefore able to sell their electricity in at very elevated rates, right? And they are generating massive profits while people struggle. There is a way to control this. The government can step in and limit the amount of profit that can be produced by those companies, and they should.
Now, some people are calling for the Alberta NDP to move a little bit more towards the political centre. Now, with that in mind, what are your thoughts on someone like Naheed Nenshi being part of this race and conversation? Do you have any concerns about maybe a change in the direction for the party?
So I think having Naheed in this race is incredibly exciting. I think it'll bring a lot of new voices in. Obviously, I don't think he's the right person to lead the party. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this. But I don't think that it necessarily requires a shift to center. I think it requires a shift in our focus. So in the last election, I think everyone whose top issue was healthcare and education probably voted with us, right? Because we had really strong plans on that and were trusted on it. I think that for a lot of people, their top issue is, how do I pay my mortgage? How do I afford my groceries? And we didn't speak to that particularly well. So I think what we do better next time is not necessarily to shift right, because I think there is a perspective on the economy that is more progressive. And that is the perspective where we give more to those in the middle and those at the bottom to help keep the economy going. And I think that that is the right story. So I don't think that we have to necessarily shift right. I just think we have to talk about the issues that are top of mind for people.
So what are your thoughts on addressing both the opioid crisis in our province and a lot of the homeless issues we're seeing in many of our cities?
Yeah, so I think, the UCP basically cut all investment in affordable housing about 5 years ago. And I think that we see the results of that program on their part on the streets around us every day. And I think that's incredibly troubling. I obviously spent a lot of time talking to police chiefs when we were in government, and most of them will tell you that the single best investment you can make in public safety in terms of return on dollars is in affordable housing. And so I think we really need to do that. And we need to invest as well in mental health treatment that runs across the spectrum. The UCP are very focused on this abstinence only treatment. That's the only thing that they will invest in. That's very problematic because it's been the case for at least 25 years that we have known that while that works for some people, it isn't the most effective treatment, i.e., it doesn't work for the most number of people. So we have to provide people with different treatment options that will work for them.
Now, there seems to be a little bit of debate within party ranks as to whether or not rent control would really bring a net benefit to Albertans. How do you see it?
So I think that as a temporary measure, that is absolutely something that any government should be looking at. Lougheed looked at it as well. I do think that there are way more components to the solution than that, right? So there is the investment in affordable housing piece because people who are driven out of that get pushed into the market, that inflates it. But we need to be looking as well around, how we build more, how we encourage things like co-op, how we encourage things like mixed market models that allow, for the long-term sustaining of sort of affordable housing while creating a community, right? So there's a lot of things we need to be doing, but yes, that's certainly something that I think any good government would be looking at, especially, 6 months ago when we introduced the bill and, people were seeing their rents go up by 30, 40%.
What about rent evictions? You hear a lot about that too. Landlords will say, no, I'm having my mother move in. I need you guys to move out. Okay, you move out and you find out they just renovated the place and then basically doubled the rent, or like you said, 30, 40%. So how do we try and prevent that? A lot of the rent evictions that we're seeing.
Yeah, so I think there is a way for the government to create regulations to manage some of that, not just evicting people for renovations, but there are in Calgary a lot of units that are owned sort of internationally, and they won't take what the market will bear, and so those units wind up empty, right? So we have housing that isn't in use because of that, and there are ways to control that. There are ways to sort of charge for empty units, to charge for empty lots on which a house could be built, to encourage people to sort of create that ecosystem. Now, I'm not suggesting that, I know that people need to pay their mortgage often on those suites. I understand that people, are looking to turn a profit, but I do think that when we're generating so much profit at the expense of people having a place to live, that's a problem, and that's a problem that the government can solve.
Now, one of your proposals is to restore rural bus service to Alberta. How would you go about doing that? And would that be entirely taxpayer funded?
So there are a lot of bus services that are popping up now in some areas, right? But it's a bit of a patchwork. It doesn't cover everything. So I think we do need to look at how to do that. We can work with existing operators and perhaps use some public dollars to fund other services. But I believe that everyone deserves access to public transit. My father grew up in Shaunavon, Saskatchewan, and that's where my grandmother remained until her death. After my grandfather passed, she had macular degeneration. So without the bus, she had no way to get to her family, right? And that's the situation of, many people living in rural communities. And if we want to sustain those rural communities, we have to think about making sure that they have the necessary public infrastructure.
Wait a minute, so you have some Saskatchewan roots. Do you bleed green, rider pride?
So I wasn't myself born in Saskatchewan, so I'm not subject to the same deal that my father was, where you have to cheer for the riders till the end of existence.
So Kathleen, any final thoughts on why party members should vote for you?
because I want to build a world where everyone has a chance to succeed. I want my daughter to have the same opportunities here that I have. And I think I have a concrete plan and policies to make sure that that's the world we build.
Kathleen Ganley is one of the 5 candidates running in the Alberta NDP leadership race. The new leader to succeed Rachel Notley will be chosen on June 22nd. Kathleen, thanks so much for joining us today from Edmonton.
Thank you.
Well, many of us have considered doing missionary work of some kind, but perhaps have not been able to make it happen. Well, there are opportunities to dip your feet in the water, so to speak, through short-term mission trips. Today's guest has done just that. Joining us from the Edmonton area is Sheena Bartling. Sheena, good to have you with us.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. So you recently went on a short-term missions trip to Rwanda. And now,
Yes.
Was that with the Summit Church in Edmonton?
Yeah, you bet. The local church I go to in Edmonton.
Okay. So what was it that lit the spark in you to do a trip like this?
I've just always had a heart for wanting to help others, and this opportunity came up, and I just felt like it was an amazing opportunity for me and my daughter. She also went, my teenage daughter. So to get out there and help others that are less fortunate in many ways, and just jump right in and give it a try.
Right. Now, was that something called the House of Hope? Is that correct?
Yeah, the main reason we went there is to work on the House of Hope. A couple of our pastors have started the House of Hope there, and they've been working on it for a few years. COVID kind of got in the way of the process of things, but
Can you tell us kind of the scope of work that you did while you were there?
yeah, we did a lot. We moved a lot of bricks, moved a lot of cement, sanding and stuff like that. Did a lot of measuring, got the ceiling work done, and they have the doors on now. Just a lot of inner house work. And we had a lot of help from the locals, the kids in the area. They were just so happy to hop in and help out in any way they could. So it's just amazing.
Wow, that sounds very rewarding. Can you tell us how this House of Hope ministers to needy women and children?
Yeah, so this place is being built for at-risk women and children, so they can break the cycle of poverty in their families. A lot of 80% of orphans in Rwanda are not actually parentless. It's just they don't have the money to take care of their children. So unfortunately, this is a place where women and children can go and be safe and learn a skill to break that cycle and start their own business.
Oh,
And that's the goal.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So what are some of the skills that the women are taught there?
Right now, we're starting with sewing, and we want to build bigger. So, thinking education and a lot of other entrepreneurial skills. And we're just starting with sewing for right now, just with the size of property that we have. And then the more that grows, we're hoping to buy the property right next to the House of Hope, as it is right now, and expand so we can do more in that area.
Oh, that's wonderful. Now, we've been talking about women and children. Does that mean that there's not a lot of men in the community?
Well, there's the AIDS, there's a lot of, it's so easy to pass away from sickness there with the medical care. There's so much poverty. So it's just there's unfortunately a lot of widows.
Is that right?
So
wow.
Yeah.
So is this also then helping the mothers or the ladies in the community to have their own businesses?
Yeah, so the goal is that they can learn the skill. The sewing school takes about 9 to 10 months, and then they get started with their own business. So you can work at a market or get your own shop started, which some of them have done that. And so, make get out of that cycle of poverty for your family. And
Well, it's very rewarding to do, and it's wonderful that the church from Edmonton is doing that. So the church and the organization that they've set up there, my understanding is that they operate a school for the community, and your team was participating in the activities with the children. What was that like?
yeah, that was a lot of fun. We set up tents for the children and the parents, and it was just a great chance to mingle with the parents, meet with the parents, and we handed out food for everybody. We did a great big lunch, and after that, we handed out toys, dolls, and soccer balls. These children, they don't really have any toys. There's just no money for that whatsoever. So it was an amazing day. There was so much joy.
Wow. So I got to ask you just a question about that. There must have been some real culture shock in you just even trying to grasp the level of poverty. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's really quite sad to see, these children and women, or a lot of just sitting there. Not a lot of children can't afford to go to school, so there's a woman. Actually, we showed up to work on House of Hope, and it's been empty. There's nobody there, so she's taken up living there because she has no home, and that's just where she decided to stay. So she's there with her little child, and she's a widow, and it's heartbreaking. There's no home for her, so it's really sad to see.
Yeah, I know that when I've worked with some at-risk groups, the level of poverty was just hard for me even to comprehend. Now, I have read in prepping for this interview that the children actually make their own soccer balls out of bundles of leaves. Is that right? And they tie them together with a string?
Yes, I was really surprised to see that. I wasn't expecting that at all. But when you don't have any funds to buy anything, then that's their soccer ball. So it was really cool to see them in so much joy when we brought a lot of soccer balls, and they just don't have any money to buy any extra than the clothes on their back and the food that they have. So the balls, yeah, it was quite a shock. That just goes to show you that the poverty is huge there.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's something that we don't really grasp, that's for sure.
No,
So,
absolutely not.
yeah, YWAM, Youth with a Mission, they also have a base in that area, and you spent a day with the YWAM crew reaching out to those in need, and you had a chance to pray with the sick. Can you share how that went?
Yeah, so we went to the YWAM base for the day, and we spent a couple hours worshiping with them and touring the base, and just letting a couple people know. Like, we had a couple teenage girls there, so it was really great for them to see. And we separated into groups of 4, and we went out to all different areas that YWAM supports and in the villages. So just lots and lots of poverty. And we went and prayed for a widow, and she's also disabled and has some disabled children. So we brought her 2 big bags of rice, and she was just so happy to see us, and just to have someone come pray over her and visit with her. And so circumstances are really unfortunate how she's living. And so it was really a big eye opener, and really nice to sit there with her and visit with her and pray with her. Of course, we had a translator. So
Right. Now, thinking back to when I was a teenager growing up in Medicine Hat, we would have people from our community who would go with YWAM and come back, and they would talk about the personal impact that the missions trip had on them. Can you tell us, how did this trip impact you personally, and maybe even your daughter or others on the team?
Well, I think the biggest thing, it's very vulnerable to, I think, step outside your comfort zone and go into a different region where it's a culture shock, and you're also there to help. So you're really just diving right in, and there's a lot of growth in that. So the biggest the biggest thing for me was, just how fortunate we are. That is a great reminder of how fortunate we are here, and the growth in my heart, and stepping into, a lot of different areas of just praying for people and getting right in there is not something that we normally do back home, right? But when you're there, that's what you're there to do. And so there's a lot of growth in that. And that was the biggest thing for me, for sure.
So being back in country now, has it changed your perspective in, let's say, shopping, or the size of your paycheck versus taxes and disposable income? Could you talk a little bit about that change?
Yeah, so it's interesting because before we went, my daughter, she's 14, and she was talking about these shoes that she really wanted to buy. And there's some sort of Nike shoe, and she was going to save up for them. And they're, of course, a ridiculous price. We came back and she said, "You know what, Mom, I don't need those shoes." So that's just goes to, we spend a lot of money on things that we think are important, or that society tells us are important, when in reality, they're the bigger picture. What's going on in the world is we don't really need all those things, and there's other ways to spend our money.
Yeah.
If we have the opportunity to help, then yeah.
Yeah, and when you think about how far that even half the cost of those shoes could go to help people who are less fortunate, not that we have to send everything that we have, but when you quantify it in that way, it totally changes your outlook, doesn't it?
Yeah, to see these children, like most of them weren't wearing shoes a lot of the time. So I think she really was just, it was a big shock for her. So I thought it was just an amazing opportunity for all the girls that age to realize that, things aren't really, the world doesn't revolve around us and what we want all the time. And
Now, one of the things we kind of circled around that we didn't touch on is the fact that there's a lot of widows. And I'm sure we all think back 30 years ago when Rwanda was having a genocide. When you were there, was that the fallout from that still evident in the people who were left behind?
Yes, absolutely. We did go visit the genocide memorial that they have in Kigali, and it was absolutely heartbreaking. The government actually does put a lot of money in and has a lot of resources out for both sides. If were a victim, or if you were on the other side where you were hurting people, then you can still get forgiveness. That they're very, very, very much focused on forgiveness there, the government. So any sort of resources they need, they pour a lot of money into that. So forgiveness is very much focused on, and living as one is a big part of the route that they're going. And unfortunately, there's still a lot of people living in that anger, and that takes time, but there is a big emphasis on living as one and forgiving one another. So it was great to see that the government has so many support programs set up for everyone.
Right. And forgiveness is something that we all have to deal with. I'm going to maybe presume that was probably impactful for you.
Yeah, it was very, it just really tore at my heart to see everything in the memorial, especially the children's section. That was a couple tears came out there. It was really hard to see. And my daughter really just gave her a lot of different perspectives as well on life, and how precious life is, and how easy hate and anger can take over, and to not let that take root, and how important forgiveness is.
Right.
So,
yeah, it's a sobering thought, and something that we need to keep in mind, even if we don't have that extreme of an experience. Now, if our viewers are watching and they're feeling some desire to help, is there a way that they can support House of Hope?
Yeah, absolutely. House of Hope is they're building based just straight from donations. So if anyone's feeling called to partner with them in sponsorship or just donating, any sort of amount that can help, there's House of Hope website is at builderscollab.ca, and there's information on there how you can e-transfer or even contact Heather and Jamie, who are the pastors leading House of Hope and taking on that mission. So you can also email them with any questions that you might have. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I know that it's just a great opportunity to know of organizations like this, because we cannot even imagine in our first world life of what it is like to literally have no place to call home, right? Or literally have no food for 3 days.
Yeah, living on the streets, no food, no clothes, and you have children to support. And you're right, we don't know most of us don't know what that's like here. So it's great to be able to know a place like House of Hope that you can reach out to if you're feeling called to, help in some way. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, Sheena, thank you so much for chatting. It was wonderful to hear about House of Hope and your experience.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me.
That was Sheena Bartling. She joined us from her home near Edmonton. I'm Michael Clausen, and for all of us here at Bridge City News, thanks very much for watching.